said that our Constitution, it was made for a moral people. And so the words on that page absolutely matter. They're the operating document, that's the North Star of how we're to live as a country. But his real message, their real message, was this only works, right? These are just words on a piece of paper. Unless we have a culture that's ready to accept the greatest document that has secured human freedoms in human history. And now that I'm talking to a young audience today, I wanted to bring that moment into the present. To tell you a little bit about what I think is going on in the country today. What's happening in America? I usually speak to audiences that are older than me. I usually say I'm the young person in the room. I'm 37 years old. I'm the first millennial ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. Thank you, I appreciate it. But today I'm speaking to your generation. And I'll tell you what's true about young people in this country, certainly young adults, but even younger Americans, is that we're all hungry for a cause. Yeah. We're starved for purpose and meaning and identity. At a time in our national history when the things that used to fill that void, faith, patriotism, hard work, family, these things have disappeared. And that leaves a moral vacuum in its way, a black hole. And when you have a black hole that runs that deep, that is when the poison fills the void. John Adams knew that in 1789, as we ought to remember it today. Yes, those are words on a page, but our heart is not open to accepting those words unless we're grounded in our own sense of who we really are. I actually think this is our moment. Odd as that sounds. As conservatives, as Americans, I don't even use the word conservatives, as Americans, this is our moment to now level up and to fill that vacuum with our vision of what it actually means to be an American today. You ask young people, you ask even people my age, that question. What does it mean to be an American? You get a blank stare in response. That's the vacuum. That's the void. This is our moment to fill that void with our answer to what it means to be a citizen of this nation. To me, it means we believe in the ideals that set this nation into motion 250 years ago. Ideals like meritocracy and the pursuit of excellence, that you get ahead in this country, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. That's why I've said we need to end affirmative action and other programs in this country. What does it mean to be American? It means we believe in the rule of law, that we are a nation not of men, but a nation of laws, as our founding fathers reminded us. That means, in the present, that people like my parents do get to come to this country legally, through the front door. If they follow the rules, pay their taxes. In their case, they raised two kids, both of us. Went on and found companies that helped thousands of Americans. We should be open to legal immigrants like that. But it also means that your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. That's why I've said it is a constitutionally appropriate use of our military to secure our southern border and our northern border too, because we're a nation founded on the rule of law. Above all, what was enshrined, what was the vision enshrined in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution? It was a radical idea that the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government. That's what we fought a revolution to secure in 1776. And I think it's really important for us to understand how radical that idea really was. And there's a temptation in modern America. We're a divided nation, no doubt. For the young people in this room, I want to give you genuine hope and conviction that it's not going to stay that way. It's a temporary phase we're going through. But the way we're going to get through it is not by compromising on our ideals. It is by being uncompromising about the radical ideals that set this country into motion. See the 1776 flag right there, in 1776. It means that we believe something different than the old world believed. In the old world, they had a vision that the people could not be trusted to sort out their differences on the most important questions of their day. It had to be done by monarchs, by aristocrats, by church leaders, by business leaders, who made those decisions in the back of palace halls. We fought a revolution in 1776 and said, no, we're going to do it the other way. That for better or worse, we the people decide how we settle our differences on today. Let's bring it to the present. How or whether to affect climate policies. How or whether to affect prior injustices based on race or gender. Whatever your opinions are, we the people decide that through free speech and open debate in the public square where everyone's voice and vote counts equally. And yet today, thank you. And yet today, that old worldview rears its head again. Today, we don't live in a three-branch constitutional republic. That's what our Constitution says we're supposed to live under. Go to Washington, D.C. today. You know, I took my son there a few weeks ago. We like to teach them history. I took him to Congress. It's a beautiful building. It's the one where our founding fathers thought we were going to make the laws of this country. It's what we tell ourselves. That's what I told my son. He's 3. I told him I'd like for him to know the way that it was supposed to work. But the reality is that's not what the laws are. The people who we elect to run the government are not the ones who run the government today. It's in all the buildings that I didn't take him to, the boring looking ones. The U.S. Department of Education, the FBI, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the IRS, the ATF, the 3-letter regulatory agencies, FDA, SEC, CDC, you name it. That's where the lawmaking authority actually rests today. That's a perversion of our Constitution. Imagine if George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, Benjamin Franklin, they're walking the streets today in Washington, D.C. They wouldn't recognize what it was relative to the Constitution that they set into motion 250 years ago. So people find it. I've lost many donors over this. People find it extreme when I say things that I mean, that I'm going to do. Things like shutting down those government agencies. Tonight, and anyone who happens to be in that area, you're more than invited. I'm going to be at St. Anselm College tonight, laying out my detailed shutdown plans. It's going to be like a prosecutor. They have those posters that lay out exactly how they're going to bring the case. We're going to exactly lay out the detailed anatomy of how we will shut down the first 3 agencies I've committed to shut down. The FBI, the Department of Education, and the Nuclear Regulatory That'll be good. That's actually what it means to live in a 3-branch constitutional republic. This is not a Republican or Democratic. This is not about Republicans and Democrats. It's not about black versus white, man versus woman, gay versus straight. That is what they will teach you to believe. But it is a myth. The division is artificial. The red versus blue, black versus white. That is what they make up to deflect accountability from the real divide in this country between the managerial class and the everyday citizen, between the new world and the old world. I think we live in a 1776 moment today. Okay, thank you. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's a unique thing. As young people, it's a unique moment for you to be Americans. I want you to, if you take one thing away from me today, it's this. Reject the narrative that you're fed. The narrative that we are somehow a nation in decline. That we are somehow at the end of the Roman Empire. That somehow, maybe we're not even Rome, we're Carthage. And that we're in decline and all we have to do is fight over the remaining scraps. I reject that vision. I think much of that division is artificial. I think most of us in this room share those 1776 ideals in common. Free speech, open debate, meritocracy, the pursuit of excellence, the rule of law, the idea that the people we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government. I think most of us agree on those ideals. I think most of us also believe that our neighbors and our classmates and our colleagues actually believe in these ideals too. It's not what the media teaches us. It's not what social media teaches us. But just look in your own community. Do most of these people agree on these basic rules of the road? Yes, they do. I truly believe it. Maybe we disagree on whether corporate tax rates should be high or low, whether ivermectin treats COVID. This is small ball. These are details. But when it comes to the basic rules of the road, when it comes to the 1776 vision of this country, the 1789 commitments we made in the Constitution, most of us in this country still share those in common. And so the young people in this room, I will tell you something, your best days in life as individuals, they're still ahead of you. It always feels like you've lived a long life, no matter what age you are. But I promise you your best days are still ahead of you. But the second promise I'll make you is that our nation's best days are still ahead of us. We're not a nation in decline. We're still a nation in our ascent. In the early stages of our ascent, on our way to that mountaintop. I don't even think we're at base camp yet. And the way we're going to get there isn't by reaching some partisan Republican versus Democrat compromise. It isn't through reform. It's actually through revolution. Through reviving the ideals of the American Revolution. That is the special moment you live in today. And with your help, we will revive those ideals. I'm looking around the room, it's a beautiful thing that we have young men and women, black, white, brown, everything in between. This is great. Our diversity can be a beautiful thing. But our true strength is really what unites us across that diversity. That's what matters. E pluribus unum, we say for a reason. It means from many, one. That is what won us the American Revolution. That is what reunited us after the Civil War. That is what won us 2 world wars and the Cold War. That is what still gives hope to the free world today. And if we can revive that dream, that 1776 vision, over fractious group identity and grievance and victimhood, then nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus is going to defeat us. That's what American exceptionalism is all about. And that is what we together will revive to save this great nation. Thank you all. God bless you.
It's not recording.
What's your name? Tice? Tice government? What is the purpose of government? This is a deep question. So I think the purpose of the state is to preserve human liberty.
Yeah!
This is a controversial idea. Because the way and it goes to the moment we live in today. Because we're taught to believe that actually, and it usually is, the state is the threat to liberty, right? But we live in a moment today where the threats to liberty actually come in many forms. The merger of state power and corporate power to do what the government couldn't do directly. Cultural threats to liberty that show up in our schools and in ways that don't appear to directly be coming from the government. So I go back to that original first principle. Liberty pre-exists before the state does. Right? We're free human beings, and we the people cause the state to come into existence. So what is its purpose? Its purpose is to preserve. It doesn't create the liberty. But to preserve that liberty and to protect it from the threats created by the state, but really from any other threats that come between the state and the private sector as well. And I think that's as relevant today as it was in 1776. That's how I think of
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
It's an even more beautiful way
Yes.
of building the same thing. God-given rights. They were not
Yes.
state-given rights.
Yes.
They were rights given to us by God, by our Creator.
Yes.
And that's what we have to do.
Yes.
That's my boy. All right.
I'm Frank Winston. I'm from Massachusetts.
Oh, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
I have two questions. My first question is, what makes you stand out from other candidates, and how are you going to move our country forward, like compared to President Trump?
Thank you. So I'm actually a little bit different than some of the other candidates in this race. I'm not running against anybody. I'm running for this country.
Yes.
And so I actually respect the heck out of the other candidates, including President Trump, who was an outstanding president in my opinion. But the question is, how do we take our America First agenda to the next level? I'm not a Trump America First conservative. I'm a George Washington America First conservative.
Wow. Oh, wow. That's cool.
This farewell speech is probably one of the most beautiful speeches ever given in American history. We would do well to remember that today. And I think the America First agenda does not belong to me. It doesn't belong to Trump.
That's true.
It belongs to you all. The people of this country. It belongs to we the people. And so what am I going to bring to this? Why am I doing this? I'm 37 years old. I've never been in government. I think that's a good thing. Our founding fathers had never been in government until they caused our government to come into existence. I've got fresh legs. Like many of you, I hope and pray and believe that my best days too are yet ahead of me, just as our nation's best days are ahead of us. And I think it might take a young person of a different generation to see our country in that way.
Yes.
I'm also a pragmatist.
Yes.
So I've built large-scale companies. I don't think the only way we should drive positive change in our country is through the government. Most positive change happens outside the government. That's how I built my career. But I also made me a pragmatist. And I'll answer your question directly. I don't believe in ducking questions. Though I respect Trump and his agenda immensely, it's just a fact that, I can't explain it to you, but it's just a fact, that there's something about him that when he speaks and when he's sitting in the White House, 30% or so of this country suffers from a form of psychiatric illness that I cannot explain. It's just reality. It really is. People will hear about, men identifying as women and women identifying as men. That's one craze spreading across this country. You start having Republicans that start identifying as Democrats. Right? It's sort of an identity crisis. And I think that I care about this nation more than I do about any one man, myself included. But the question is, how do we take that agenda even further and unite the country in the process? And for whatever reason, I haven't had the psychiatric illness-inducing effect on our country, even as I'm saying many of the same things, even as I'm actually going further with many of those same policies, using the military on the southern border, not just building the wall that they built tunnels underneath now. shutting down the Department of Education, not just putting Betsy DeVos on top of it, ending affirmative action by ending the executive order that Lyndon Johnson wrote that created it without fear. That's a sacred cow you're not supposed to touch. I said on day one, I'll end that. I think part of the way we're able to unite this country is, and our founding fathers set this example for us. Ronald Reagan, I think, is the last recent president who set this example for us. We go further when we do so standing on strong moral foundations.
Yeah.
On principles and moral authority. We go further than if we're just driven by vengeance and grievance. And so to me, the question is, how do we take that agenda even further? My honest reason for being in this race is I think I'm the only person who's going to be able to go even further than Trump did with that agenda, while also uniting the country. And most importantly, delivering a landslide election like what Ronald Reagan did in 1980. That's what I think we can do in the revolution of 2024. Thank you for that question.
Wow.
How are you going to restore our moral and traditional values that the founding fathers had, and how are we going to turn this country around? Because it's, from what I'm seeing, it's like this whole country is like going down like a hole.
Yeah. So let me give you my diagnosis. I'm not a believer in fake optimism. I don't believe now is the moment for me to just come here and walk in and tell you, it's morning in America again. Hold hands, kumbaya, compromise, let's get along and move forward, call it a day. It's not going to work. I don't think that we ever had a moment for that. If that moment ever existed, that train has long passed. We have to see the present with clear eyes. And actually look ourselves in the mirror and look deep. And ask ourselves what role each of us played. Everyone, 360 degrees, the media, the left doesn't do this enough, but I don't just blame it, all of us, in asking what role we played in getting exactly how we are. Maybe it was complacency. Maybe it was bending the knee to an authority. We can complain about big government all we want, and then expect the Constitution or our politicians to protect us. It doesn't work that way. Right. Part of the problem, I think this goes back to even the Judeo-Christian founding of this nation. Lessons from the book of Exodus. Think about this. When the Israelites escaped from the Pharaoh, what did they say? They're lost in the desert. They don't find the promised land. They say, we want to go back and be ruled by the Pharaoh. And so you don't pledge allegiance to that flag. You're going to pledge allegiance to something. That's right. And you don't bend the knee to God, you're going to bend the knee to something. Call it climate, COVID, whatever it is. And so I think that the easy part is pointing the finger at the tyrannical, authoritarian state that rears its ugly head from time to time. The harder part is taking a long, hard look in the mirror and asking ourselves, what is it inside of us that makes us want to consent and bend the knee? And I think that goes back to that void, that moral void. We're like a bunch of blind bats, all of us, not just young people, all of us. We're lost in a cave trying to figure out where we are. How does a bat figure out where it is in the cave? Can't see. Sonar. Send sonar signals. Bounce off the wall of that cave, and it comes back and says, this is where I am. We human beings, we do the same thing. We send out a sonar signal. It bounces off a pillar of truth. My family. The mother and father who brought me into this world. That is true. That is real. That bounces back and says, this is where I am. Bounces off of my belief in God. My conviction in this nation, that I'm a citizen of this nation, not some global citizen. Those things are true. That bounces back and tells me this is where I am. I work hard. I create something in the world. I'm proud of that. That means something to me. That bounces back. Tells me this is where I am. What happens when those things each disappear? We send out these signals, and then nothing comes back. We're lost in that desert. And that's what lets us consent to bending the knee. And I think that's when we think about Constitution, Camp Constitution. That's what our founding fathers actually had, was that grounding in the self-confidence that manifests itself in that document. But that document is just a false idol if we don't remember what it actually represents. The conviction in who we really are. And I think that that's one of the things we've lost, is our sense of self-confidence. Thomas Jefferson wrote that. I feel like I just saw it. Okay, there it is. There it is. Declaration of Independence. independence. People notice I think he was like 24 years old when he wrote that. The opening lines, towards the opening lines, the parts we remember, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Beautiful lines, but there's a part of it I'd like to share. You know what? I don't like just talking about our history. I don't like talking about the importance of teaching history. I just like talking about history. So, Benjamin Franklin over there, Thomas Jefferson over there. I'll tell you what, they had an interesting relationship. The opening lines never sat well with me, really. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And it makes sense to me. If they were self-evident, we wouldn't have to write that whole thing, right? It would have been obvious. Well, that wasn't Thomas Jefferson's initial chosen language. Benjamin Franklin said we needed to make it more secular, so he added it. Thomas Jefferson's initial lines were, we hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable. And that sounds closer to the flame to me. And as he wrote those words on the page, I'll teach you another fun fact about history today. You know, the swivel chair we have. I think we have one in this room, but there's swivel chair as you swivel around. Turns out Thomas Jefferson in his 20s, he was still a heavy-set man. He felt like he needed the swivel chair to do this. There wasn't one. So he invented it. So the swivel chair that we use today was invented by Thomas Jefferson. The Franklin stove was invented by Benjamin Franklin, who also invented other forms of actually air conduction filtering. Even the first treatment for the common cold was actually invented by Benjamin Franklin. See, these guys we don't have that today, but I'm hopeful that we can. This is why I get excited when I see a room filled of young people who are so hungry for the history and the constitutional principles this country was founded on. It gives me hope. These guys didn't say that, oh, that's what an expert does. I'm not trained as an expert or an engineer to invent the swivel chair, so I'm not going to do that. He said, no, that's what I need, and I'm going to do that right now, and then I'm going to go back to writing the greatest founding document for a nation in human history when I'm in my 20s. And another guy says, you know what? I have an idea for how a stove should work, so I'm going to do it, even though I'm one of the great political theorists of my time. And by the way, I was an ambassador to France before that. There's something in the water in 1776. But I think that still is in the water today. We just have to actually open our eyes and see it. Take a sip. See how it tastes. We live in a 1776 moment. I think there's a Thomas Jefferson and a Benjamin Franklin somewhere in this room. And I see in the next 20 years, I'm going to expect to see each of you revive that nation as those gentlemen did 250 years ago. So can the young men and women in this room do so today. So thank you. I'll take one more question. Thanks. Well, why don't you come up? You can both ask your questions. I'll answer them together. I hate to see you. Come on.
My name is Elizabeth Ramasawamy. I'm from Tennessee. My question is for you. How can you God back into the country?
Love your question. What's your name?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. And you ask me your question too, young man? Take this together.
My question is, if you win the presidency, how would you leave a imprint on future generations of Americans? What would you do to help the future?
So in some ways, I think the answers to those two questions actually do go together. So my job as a candidate, I'll be honest with you, I would rather speak the truth at every step and lose an election than to win by playing some political stakes and ladders. And if I'm elected as president, I just want to keep doing the same thing. And so I think one of the things we need to do is to speak that truth without apology. How do you revive that nation? I think part of it, part of this issues with God too. God's become a four-letter word in our culture. I think that there is a gap between what people are willing to say in private and what people are willing to say in public. You want to know the best measure of the health of our constitutional republic? It's not the number of ballots we cast every November. It is the percentage of people who feel free to say what they actually think in public. that border was going to be talking about God. I hope speaking the truth gives hope to young Americans. And one of the things I'm trying to do every day, maybe we'll just wrap with this today, is I'll speak the truth. That you're not supposed to speak in public, but one of the things we'll realize is once we do, fear has been infectious. Courage can be contagious too. It just requires more of us to start showing it. So let's speak that truth that God is real.
Ooh. Yeah.
Two genders. That fossil fuels are a requirement for human prosperity.
Wow. Okay.
Reverse racism is racism.
Yeah.
An open border is not border. Parents determine the education of their children.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The nuclear family is the best known form of governance to mankind.
Yeah. Bridge it up.
Capitalism is the best system known to man to lift us up from poverty. There are 3 branches of government laid out in our Constitution, not 4. And the U.S. Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedom in human history. That is the truth. We will stand up for the truth. We will fight for the truth. That's what won us the American Revolution. That is what will win us the revolution of 2024. Thank you all. God bless you.
Yeah.
And God bless everybody. Thank you.
All right, God bless you. We're going to have a parade of the youngsters. Is that happening in our food? Okay.
Teenagers, Mrs. Nichols needs your help. 20 of you at the entrance of the kids' classroom. You have to need your help. Please don't pull this off. 20 boys and girls.
There's one more.
I'm in
Could do it. Maybe if he gets it, let's see what happens. But he did say an interesting point about the whole thing regarding the whole regarding the Trump derangement syndrome, where people go crazy for some weird reason. And so I have to go run out and go catch my kids. They're doing the march right now, so I'll talk to you soon. All right. Peace. God bless. All right. Bye.
Oh, I think I hear the kids.